Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lauren. Happy birthday to you.
My name is John Sipman. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I was on a medevac crew, and we would pick up wounded and even dead. I'm one of 4 brothers, the last to go to Vietnam. I didn't think I'd make it home a lot of times, and I'm going to read to you something in response to that. It's called The Letter Never Sent. I paused before walking across the tarmac to get on that Freedom Bird home. I had long waited to get to this point. I thought of the days I had doubts and how my friends gave their all, their full measured amount. When you're young, death seems a foreign word until you go to war. Then it becomes a discerning sword. Flying into an LZ to pick up wounded had its own strain. But flying in to pick up soldiers gone was a whole different ballgame. With wounded, there was hope. With the dead, only agony and pain. The pilot was trained to fly the Huey. The soldier on the ground was trained to kill the enemy. The doctors, nurses, and medics were trained to help the wounded. But no one was trained for the pain and sorrow, the trauma, the screaming, the bleeding, and the mess it made when you cleaned off the deck of the Huey. And no training prepares you for being asked point blank, am I going to die? As if I knew or had magic of some kind. You tell them, you tell yourself, you are going to be all right. But you know it's a blind lie. You give your best confident face, but what you said felt like a disgrace. I only did that twice. It became too much to embrace. There's that part of you shaking and wrenching inside because you lied to ease that dying soldier's mind. But there was no time for that. You had a job to do. You had to stay focused. There was always more to do. It was never routine, especially when a soldier died while I held his head on my knees. How does a young soldier try and deal with that? I don't know. So I prepared a letter in case something went wrong. I felt I had cheated death, especially since my friends were gone. Why am I still here? Why am I still able to breathe? That was the feeling that got me more than the rest. So I tried to think of it and bury it like the rest. I tried not to think of it and bury it like the rest. One day after landing, I noticed a shell had ripped through my vest. It wasn't the first time death had tried to deliver. There were other times shells slid by and missed me by a sliver. I decided to write a letter to my folks to express my deepest heartfelt love. I did not expect to see them again because life around me seemed not to hold. I began the letter with, if you have received this letter, then I have passed. I love you so much. A son couldn't have asked for better folks. I'm sorry for anything I have done to cause you hurt or pain. But I want you to know this most. I love you more than I can say. Please remember the way I was, the man you have made me, the man I have become. A soldier that did his duty without hesitation or complaint. I was hoping to come home like my brothers. I'm sorry, Mom. I won't be coming home like them. Thank you for letting me be what I thought I should be. Thank you for believing in me with your great love. And Dad, thank you for being the tough example of a man so strong. My eternal love always, your son, John. I kept this letter nearly 2 months in my front fatigue pocket. I told my pilot about it so he knew where it was if my time came. I had to write the letter over once. It had gotten too wet because I carried it everywhere I went. When the time came for me to get on that Freedom Bird home, I stopped short of the plane. My best intention no longer needed. I took the letter from my pocket and looked at it with relief. This letter that held the sad surprise filled with grief. I tore it up, the letter knowing it would have been the last I would have sent. I never told my folks of the letter that was at the ready because I was able to do what I was hoping to do, and that was to make myself a special delivery. I was one step closer to being on my way home, relieved that that letter never made it out of Vietnam.
I found that I was having trouble controlling my emotions sometimes, my anger, my frustrations. It was easier for me to get frustrated. And when I did get frustrated, I took it more seriously, as if something serious was going on. I kind of felt alienated from the civilian world because I didn't share anything in common.
Coming back, you lose the brotherhood. When I got out, guys from my team, guys from my platoon got out largely around the same time, and everybody kind of scattered. Everybody went back to their hometowns. Very few guys kind of stayed around in the same region, and suddenly you go from having this very tight-knit group that you trust with everything, that you share everything, and that you've been through everything with, and now suddenly they're just gone.
I spent all my time up on the DMZ, that's the demilitarized zone. I flew where most walked and humped through jungle and trees. Flying out of Quan Tri, responding to a call, we saddled up and headed out in late fall. The coordinates brought us to a jungle floor. An ambush had taken place the night before. We picked up the wounded and brought them through the doors. Some of the soldiers receiving life-threatening needs that demanded our immediate attention in stopping them bleed. I went through the motions of helping these men, just as I've done for others before them. Holding plasma, giving comfort, saying, "We would be there soon," or "Try to hold on," was the common message from us few. When looking at one of their faces, one soldier was no more than a kid that had gone through the paces. We finally got them to the triage where we flew down to get them in. Later, as I cleaned off the deck and seeing the day's plight, I began to recall the echo of that particular flight. I began another day. I wore on my hands and clothes the blood of brothers whose names were unknown. Their blood stains covered me like splattered paint, spilled so indiscriminately all over the place. I felt the burden and weight of their life-changing fate that weighed heavy and deep, becoming so great. I would have preferred the color of clay or mud, or the stench of fatigues worn and torn from the jungle and sun. Instead, I wore their blood with anguish and dismay, recognizing their need from receiving deep wounds that day. There was no distinction between any specific blood type. It could have been A or B, or from O positive to O negative type. It mattered not. It was all red, flowing from each one of them. It was a premium liquid like rare gems, this red fluid that was specifically coming from them. I wore this color and its odor like it was part of my uniform, like a unit patch, insignia, or rank that was worn, because it was part of the routine of every day. When it was exposed, it began taking on different forms, turning things rotten with a stench down to the core. When it flowed, it changed whatever it touched, from clothing to bandages to the body it left. I spent time trying to wash it off. This fluid left from soldiers spilled out, scrubbing and not able to tell if I had gotten it all off or not. My skin turned raw and red because it clung to me like part of my skin. It came with morbid odors and smells, especially when worn all day and drying hard as a shell. It kept you aware of its presence and soldiers as it continued to smell. It became a color produced by small arms and mortar, by rockets and grenades and others in no order. It came with the uncertainty of recovery to its blame. Its flow carried with it sorrow and unimaginable pain, and continued in relentless and ruthless rage. Its flow will only stop when the right pressure, tourniquet, or dressing is maintained, or when it runs out and is completely drained. The more it ran, the louder the screams, because the deeper the wound would be. This was not from strange or distant men. This was from our own soldiers trying to defend. The burden doubled even without knowing names, from an element of mental and physical strain. Its infection can continue to press as I wake in a cold and unfiltered sweat. When one of them comes to me in a nightmare, exposing again the whole event, it is the common color and fluid of war.